The October wind blew yellow leaves along Tracy Avenue, gathering in the corners at the entrance to Hartwell Motors, a car repair shop. David Hartwell looked up from the hood of a Ford F-150 and wiped his hands on his worn jeans. At 32, he looked exactly how a successful auto repair shop owner should look. Broad-shouldered, confident in his movements, and with that special smile that made customers trust him with their cars and their money. "Mrs. Patterson, your Buick is ready," he said to an elderly woman who was nervously clutching her purse in the waiting room. "The problem was with the alternator, just as I said. I'll give you a 6-month warranty." She broke into a grateful smile. David had a knack for getting along with people. It was his greatest talent. In the 8 years he had owned the shop, his customer base had grown so much that he had to turn people away. In a neighborhood where most people were barely making ends meet, David's auto repair shop was a real success story. His assistant Tommy, a guy in his 20s with tattooed arms, approached with a tablet. "Boss, we already have 7 cars booked for tomorrow, and this Chevrolet Malibu, the owner says he can wait until Monday." "No," David shook his head. "Tell him we'll do it on Saturday. We promised, so we'll do it." That was his philosophy. His word was his bond. Maybe that was why breaking up with Felicia 6 months ago still left a bitter taste in his mouth. He had kept all his promises, but it wasn't enough. The memory came flooding back, as it often had in recent months. Felicia was sitting on the edge of their bed in the East Side apartment, where they had lived together for almost 2 years. Her chestnut hair was loosely pulled back after a 12-hour shift at Metro Health. "David, we need to talk," she had said then, and he knew immediately from her tone that this was the conversation he had been subconsciously dreading. "You're tired," he had said, trying to change the subject. "Let's talk tomorrow." "No," she had shaken her head. "I've been thinking about this for months. We're different, David. You're a wonderful man, but something's not right between us." He remembered trying to convince her to stay. He talked about his plans for the future, about the house he wanted to buy in Lakewood, about the children they could have. But in her eyes, he saw a determination he had rarely encountered. Felicia was gentle, but when she made up her mind, there was no turning her back. "Maybe we should take a break," she said. "Just some time to think." But they both knew that a break was just a gentle way of saying, "It's over." The sound of the door opening brought David back to the present. A middle-aged man with a worried look on his face entered the workshop. "Are you David Hartwell?" he asked. "I was referred to you. They say you work miracles." David smiled, the same confident smile that had served him well in business. "Miracles is a big word, but I'm good at fixing cars. What's the problem?" At 6 o'clock, David closed the workshop and drove to his mother's house for family dinner. The house on the east side, where he had grown up, seemed smaller every year. A small, one-story house with a tiny yard, where Mary Hartwell had raised her 2 sons after her husband died of a heart attack 14 years ago. Michael was already there. He was sitting in the kitchen, silently drinking a can of beer and staring at his phone. At 28, his younger brother looked tired and withdrawn. His warehouse worker's uniform, gray pants and a blue shirt with the logo of a steel mill, was neatly laundered but couldn't hide the fact that Michael was working himself to the bone. "Hey, Mike," David said, slapping his brother on the shoulder. Michael nodded without looking up from his phone. "Davy!" Mary appeared from the living room with a beaming smile. At 58, she was still an attractive woman, although years of hard work as a librarian had left their mark. "How's the workshop? I heard from Mrs. Coleman that you fixed her Honda for half what the dealership wanted." "Things are good, Mom," David said, sitting down at the table across from his brother. "How's it going at the factory, Mike?" Michael shrugged, still staring at his phone. "Fine." Mary brought in plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes. "Michael's been working overtime for 3 weeks straight," she said, but there was none of the pride in her voice that she had when she talked about David's workshop. The conversation didn't flow during dinner. Mary talked about what was happening at the library. David shared his plans for expanding the business, and Michael mostly kept quiet. It was the familiar dynamic of their family gatherings in recent years. "How's your personal life, Davy?" his mother asked, serving him a second helping. "Maybe it's time to think about a family? You're 32. David sensed Michael's tension. Not until I meet the right girl, Mom. What about Felicia? She was so nice. Maybe you should try to work things out? Mom? David shook his head. We broke up. It was mutual. Michael finally looked up. Is Felicia still working at the same clinic? Yes, at Metro Health, David replied, not understanding where his brother was going with this. I see her on the bus sometimes, Michael said quietly. She looks good. There was something strange in his voice. David looked closely at his brother, but Michael stared back at his plate. Michael, dear, it's time for you to find a nice girl too, Mary said. Look at your brother, he's a successful businessman. He's always had beautiful girlfriends. Maybe you could learn from him? David saw Michael's jaw tighten. These comparisons had been a constant theme in their home since childhood. Mary didn't do it on purpose. She just couldn't hide her pride in her older son and her disappointment that the younger one hadn't achieved the same heights. Mike's a great guy, David interjected. He just doesn't like to show off. Michael glanced at him quickly, either gratefully or suspiciously. After dinner, the brothers stepped out onto the porch. It was a cool October evening, and they smoked in silence, a habit they had both picked up as teenagers and never been able to quit. Mom didn't mean to hurt you, David said. You know she's proud of you. Michael took a long drag on his cigarette. Yeah, sure she is, he said bitterly, especially when she compares you to me. Mike. Cut it out, Dave, Michael said, tossing his cigarette butt onto the sidewalk. I'm used to it. He walked away without saying goodbye, and David stood on the porch watching his brother get into his beat-up Nissan Sentra. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Michael Hartwell was finishing his shift at a steel mill warehouse. The huge room with high ceilings and rows of shelves was lit by cold fluorescent lights. Michael was working alone. The night shift at the warehouse rarely required more than one person. He methodically checked the goods that had arrived during the day, comparing the delivery notes with the actual contents of the boxes. The work was monotonous, but it suited him. No one around, no comparisons, no one to remind him of what he hadn't achieved. Michael wasn't stupid. He understood that his life had not turned out the way he had dreamed it would when he was young. After school, he tried to go to college, but he didn't have enough money for tuition, and he was afraid to take out a loan for his education. David was already working at a car repair shop and saving money to start his own business. Everything came easily to him: school, work, and girls. Michael got a temporary job at a factory to save money for school. That was 8 years ago. The temporary job became permanent, and his plans for the future dissolved into a routine of shifts, paychecks, and rare days off. He didn't envy his brother. At least, that's what he told himself. He just sometimes wondered what would have happened if his parents had supported both sons equally. What would have happened if his mother had said something about him with the same pride she showed for David, even just once. During his break, Michael went outside to get some fresh air. The factory worked around the clock, and even at night it was noisy. He took out his phone and checked social media. A photo of David with customers at the auto repair shop appeared in his feed. Everyone was smiling and posing next to a repaired car. Another happy family. Thank you for your trust, read the caption. Michael put his phone away and returned to the warehouse. There were still 4 hours left until the end of his shift. On the bus ride home, he thought about family dinner, about how his mother beamed with pride when she talked about David's successes, about how his brother tried to defend him, sincerely but patronizingly about Felicia, whom he actually saw on the bus sometimes. A beautiful, intelligent woman who worked at a clinic and helped people. Of course, she was dating David. David always got the best of everything. Michael got off at his stop and walked slowly to his home, a small rented apartment in a neighborhood that was considered one of the most dangerous in Cleveland. Tomorrow would be a new shift, a new day of loneliness at the warehouse, a new evening in an empty apartment. But today, something had changed. Maybe it was his mother's words about it being time for him to find a girlfriend. Maybe it was the mention of Felicia, or maybe it was just tiredness from always being the second, less successful, less loved brother. Michael didn't know that in a few days his life would change forever. He didn't know that soon he would have a chance to get what had always belonged to David, and he didn't know what the consequences would be. 2 weeks after the family dinner, Michael Hartwell stood in line at Grind Coffee on Euclid Avenue, nervously fingering the crumpled dollar bills in his pocket. It was 6:30 in the morning, and the coffee shop was full of people rushing to work. He almost never bought coffee at places like this, too expensive for his budget. But today was a special day. Felicia Collins was standing in line 3 places ahead of him. It wasn't an accident. Michael had noticed her here a week ago when he was passing by on the bus on his way to work. Since then, he had made a detour every morning to get to this coffee shop at this exact time. Today, he finally mustered up the courage to go inside. Felicia looked tired after her night shift at Metro Health. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She wore almost no makeup, but even so, she was beautiful. Michael remembered her from when she was dating David. Back then, he had only seen her from a distance at family gatherings, and she had seemed unattainable. "Double espresso with milk, please," she ordered from the barista. Michael had rehearsed his words all week, but when Felicia turned away from the counter with her coffee in hand, his tongue seemed to stick to his throat. "Michael?" She recognized him and smiled slightly. "What a surprise. Do you work here?" "No, I was just passing by." He felt himself blushing. "How are you? I heard you're still at Metro Health." "Yes, same old," she nodded. "Are you still at the factory?" Usually, Michael was embarrassed by questions about his job, but Felicia didn't sound condescending. There was genuine interest in her voice. "Yes, 8 years now," he replied. "Listen, maybe you'd like to sit down? I have a few minutes before my bus." Felicia looked at her watch, then at him. "Sure, why not?" They sat down at a small table by the window. For the first few minutes, the conversation was awkward. They exchanged meaningless phrases about the weather and work, but gradually, Michael relaxed. Felicia was easy to talk to. She asked questions and listened attentively to his answers. "You know, I always thought you were very quiet," she said, finishing her coffee. "You hardly ever spoke at family gatherings." "It's hard to get a word in edgewise when David's around," Michael replied, immediately regretting his words. The last thing he wanted was to sound like he was complaining about his brother. But Felicia didn't seem judgmental. "I understand. David does take up a lot of space in conversations." There was something in her tone that made Michael look at her more closely. "You don't really want to talk about him." "It's just in the past," she shrugged. "We broke up 6 months ago, and it was the right decision for both of us." Michael wanted to ask why, but didn't. Instead, he said, "If you want, we don't have to talk about him at all." Felicia smiled, the first real smile she'd given him in all the time they'd been talking. That would be nice. Their first meeting lasted only 20 minutes, but when Michael got on the bus to the factory, he felt like he had won the lottery. Felicia agreed to meet him over the weekend. Just as friends, she emphasized, but for Michael, it was already more than he could have hoped for. Their first date was at a small Mexican restaurant in the Tracy area. Felicia talked about her work at the clinic, the patients she dealt with, and how difficult it was to see human suffering every day. Michael listened, mesmerized. No one had ever spoken to him so openly about serious things. "What about you? Have you ever thought about changing jobs?" she asked. "Sometimes," Michael admitted. "But I don't know what I'm capable of. David always knew what he wanted, and me." "What about you?" "I've always been in his shadow. At school, at home, everywhere. He's older, he's successful, he's the one our parents are proud of." Felicia reached across the table and touched his fingers. "Michael, you're not David, and that's okay. You don't have to be like him." The touch lasted only a few seconds, but Michael remembered it for a long time. For the next 3 weeks, they saw each other every weekend. They went to the movies, walked along the Lake Erie waterfront, sat in coffee shops, and talked about life. Michael couldn't believe this was happening to him. Felicia wasn't just beautiful. She was smart, kind, and interested in his opinion. For the first time in his life, he felt important to someone. Of course, he knew that sooner or later David would find out about their relationship. Cleveland was a big city, but their neighborhoods overlapped, and they had mutual acquaintances. Michael just hoped it wouldn't happen too soon. But his hopes were dashed. On Thursday evening, as Michael was returning home after his shift, his phone rang. It was David. "Mike, We need to talk. His brother's voice sounded tense. Are you home? Yes, I just got home. What's wrong? I'll be right over. David arrived half an hour later. He looked agitated. His hair was tousled and his shirt was wrinkled. Michael led him into his small living room, which barely had enough room for a sofa and a TV. Want a beer? Michael offered, trying to remain calm. No thanks, David said, sitting down on the edge of the sofa. Mike, I heard Tommy saw you with Felicia at the movies last weekend. Is that true? That was it. Michael knew this moment would come, but he still wasn't ready. Yes, it's true. Are you dating? We're spending time together. David stood up and began pacing the room. Mike, you realize this is wrong, right? Why is it wrong? You broke up 6 months ago. She's my ex-girlfriend. We lived together for 2 years. And you're my brother, for God's sake. Michael stood up too. So what does that mean? That I don't have a right to a personal life? That everything you touch is yours forever? That's not what this is about. David stopped in front of him. This is about respect. About boundaries that you don't cross. Boundaries? Michael's voice was bitter. Where were those boundaries when you got everything you wanted your whole life? When Mom only praised you? When you were the only one who was allowed to succeed, to be loved, to have everything? Mike, what does Mom have to do with this? What does the past have to do with this? This is about Felicia. This is about the fact that for the first time in my life, I've met a woman who sees something good in me, who doesn't constantly compare me to you, and you want to take that away from me too? David sat back down on the couch and ran his hands over his face. I don't want to take anything away. It's just Felicia, you know? I still what? I love her, David admitted quietly. I thought I could forget, but I can't. And when I hear that you're together, Michael looked at his brother in surprise. David had always seemed invulnerable to him, someone who could easily handle any problem. Seeing him so confused was unusual. Dave, you broke up with her. No, she left me. She said we weren't right for each other. And now she's dating you, and I don't understand. He fell silent. Don't understand what? What you have that I don't. The words sounded so painful that Michael almost felt sorry for his brother. Almost. Maybe it's not what you don't have, he said. Maybe it's that I'm not you. David looked up. What do you mean? You always think you know what's best for everyone else. You make decisions for other people. Maybe Felicia's tired of that. Are you a psychologist now? No. I'm just a good listener. They looked at each other in silence. For the first time in his life, Michael didn't feel like the younger brother. He felt like an equal. Mike, David stood up, heading for the door. I can't stop you from seeing her, but it will change everything between us. Do you understand that? Maybe it's time for a change, Michael replied. After David left, Michael sat down on the sofa and stared at the ceiling for a long time. He knew that the conversation with his brother was only the beginning. David was not the type to give up easily, especially when it came to what he considered his own. The next day, Michael met Felicia in the park by the lake. He told her about his conversation with David, and she listened silently. I knew he'd find out sooner or later, she said. I'm sorry I got you involved in this. You didn't drag me into anything. I made my own decision. Felicia turned to him. Michael, I need to explain something to you about why David and I broke up. You don't have to. You do. If we're going to keep seeing each other, you have a right to know the truth. They sat down on a bench, and Felicia began her story. David is a good man. He's kind, generous, reliable, but he's controlling. He always knew what I needed, often better than I did myself. He chose the restaurants we went to, the movies we watched, the friends we hung out with. At first, it seemed like he cared, but gradually I realized I was losing myself. Michael listened without interrupting. When I told him I wanted to change jobs, to move to another clinic, he gave me a list of reasons why it was a bad idea. When I wanted to sign up for Spanish classes, he said it was a waste of time and money. He wasn't cruel or mean. He just thought he knew best. And you left him because of that? I left because I realized that if I stayed in a few years, I would just be a reflection of his ideas of who I should be. But with you, she looked at him. With you, I feel like myself. Michael took her hand. "Felicia, I don't want you to have problems with your family because of me." "What problems? I'm not married to David. I have the right to date whoever I want." "Even his brother?" "Especially his brother, if that brother is a good man who treats me as an equal." That day, they kissed for the first time. Standing by Lake Erie under the gray October sky, Michael realized he was falling in love. Perhaps he already was. But he also realized that his relationship with Felicia was not just a romance. It was a war with David. A war in which the stakes were not only a woman, but also years of resentment, jealousy, and pain. And Michael was no longer sure he was ready for such a war. 2 weeks had passed since the confrontation between the brothers, and David Hartwell realized that persuasion wasn't working. Michael not only continued to see Felicia, but seemed to be doing so out of spite. They were no longer hiding. David saw their photos on social media and heard from acquaintances that the couple was showing up at the same places he used to go with Felicia. On Saturday morning, David drove to his mother's house. Mary Hartwell was sorting books in the living room, preparing them to be sent to the library. "Mom, we need to talk about Michael," he said without preamble. Mary put down the book and looked intently at her eldest son. "What's wrong with him?" "He's dating Felicia." "Your Felicia?" The surprise in his mother's voice was genuine. "My ex-girlfriend Felicia," David corrected. "And it's wrong. It's destroying our family." Mary slowly sank into a chair. "I don't understand. You broke up." "We broke up, but that doesn't mean he has the right to Mom. There are boundaries. He's my brother. This is betrayal." "David, dear," Mary reached out to him. "I understand that you're hurting, but Michael is a grown man. And if they like each other—" "Mom," David interrupted her. "You don't understand. He's doing this on purpose, to hurt me. He's always been jealous of me, and now he's decided to get his revenge." Mary thought for a moment. "Maybe he's just fallen in love. With my ex-girlfriend? What a coincidence, right?" "David, listen to me." His mother's voice became stern. "I know you're used to getting what you want, and I know I may have spoiled you, but Michael has a right to be happy." "And I don't?" "You do, but not by controlling your brother's life." David looked at his mother in confusion. For the first time in his life, she wasn't automatically taking his side. "Mom, will you talk to him?" "About what?" "Explain to him that he's destroying the family, that some things are more important than fleeting infatuations." Mary sighed. "All right, I'll talk to Michael, but I can't promise he'll listen to me." That evening, Mary called her younger son and asked him to come over. Michael showed up an hour later, looking suspiciously at his mother. "Was David here?" he asked. "Yes, he's very upset about your relationship with Felicia." Michael sat down across from his mother. "And what do you think about it?" "I think you're all adults, but I'm also thinking about the family." "What about the family?" "Michael, dear, I understand that you want to be happy, but think about David. He loved that girl so much." "Loved her? Or was he just used to having her?" Mary frowned. "What do you mean?" "Mom, do you know why they broke up? Because he smothered her with his care. He controlled her every move. Felicia left him because she couldn't take it anymore. David is a caring boy, maybe sometimes too much." "Mom," Michael leaned forward, "all my life you've made excuses for everything David has done. All my life I've been the one who has to give in, understand, sacrifice. And now, when I finally met a woman who loves me, you're asking me to give in to him again? I'm not asking you to sacrifice anything. Just think about it. Is this girl worth destroying your relationship with your brother?" Michael stood up. "You know what, Mom? Maybe this relationship is already destroyed. Maybe it was destroyed back when you decided that one son was more important than the other." "Michael!" But he was already walking toward the door. "I love Felicia, and I'm not going to give her up just to make David happy. I'm sorry." After Michael left, Mary sat in the empty house and thought for the first time that maybe she really had always favored her older son. But it was too late to change anything. 2 days later, the situation escalated even further. David, Michael, and Felicia ran into each other at the Harbor Inn bar in the flats. Felicia and Michael were sitting at a table in the corner, talking quietly, when David walked into the bar with his assistant Tommy and a few friends. Michael noticed his brother first. "We can leave," he suggested to Felicia. "No," she shook her head. "We have a right to be here." David saw them and froze for a moment. Then he walked over to their table. "Hi, Felicia," he said, ignoring Michael. "Hi, David," she replied calmly. "How are you? How's work?" "Everything's fine." David sat down on an empty chair without waiting to be invited. "You look beautiful, well rested." Michael felt himself tense up. "David, we're not alone here." "I know." David finally looked at his brother. "Just wanted to say hello to an old friend." "We're not friends, David," Felicia said firmly. "We're exes, and I'd appreciate it if you remembered that." Sure. David raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "It's just weird seeing you with him." "What's so weird about that?" Michael asked. "Well, you two aren't very similar. Felicia is used to a certain standard of living." "David," Felicia said warningly. "What? I'm just stating a fact. Michael works in a warehouse. You're a nurse with a college education. You have different interests, different goals." Michael stood up so abruptly that his chair tipped over. "Enough." "Mike, calm down." David stood up too. "I'm just worried about Felicia." "You're worried about yourself. You can't accept that she chose me." "Chose you?" David laughed. "Mike, do you think this is serious? Do you think she's going to spend her life with you?" "David, stop!" Felicia stepped between her brothers. "No, let him continue," Michael said. "Let him say what he thinks." "I think you're out of your league," David replied. "And sooner or later, Felicia will realize that." Michael took a step forward, and the brothers were face to face. "And I think you can't accept that she chose me over you." "Chose? She's using you to get back at me!" Michael punched him, quick, hard in the jaw. David staggered but stayed on his feet. "Michael!" Felicia shouted. The entire bar fell silent. Tommy and David's friends rose from their seats. David rubbed his jaw, looking at his brother in surprise. "You hit me, and I'll hit you again if you don't stay away from us." "That's it, we're leaving." Felicia took Michael by the hand. "Right now." They left the bar under the stares of the other patrons. David remained standing, still unable to believe what had happened. "Boss, are you okay?" Tommy asked. "Yes." David sat back down at the table. "Everything's fine." But that wasn't true. Nothing was fine. The next week, the situation got even worse. David started following the couple. He found out where they usually met, which restaurants they went to, where they walked. Several times, Michael noticed David's familiar truck parked near the places where he and Felicia spent time. "This is getting creepy," Felicia said one evening as they sat in her apartment. "He's watching us." "I'll talk to him," Michael promised. "Michael, maybe we should take a break? Until things calm down?" Michael looked at her in horror. "You want to break up?" "No, but I don't want you and your brother to kill each other because of me." "We won't kill each other," Michael said. But deep down he was no longer sure. The climax came on Thursday evening. Michael was returning home from work when he saw David's truck outside his apartment building. His brother was standing next to the car, smoking and clearly waiting for him. "What are you doing here?" Michael asked. "Waiting for you. We need to talk." "I have nothing to say to you." "I do," David said, throwing his cigarette on the sidewalk. "Mike, this has gone too far." "What exactly?" "Your game with Felicia. I know what you're doing. You're trying to punish me." Michael sighed wearily. "David, not everything in this world revolves around you. I'm dating Felicia because I love her." "Love?" David laughed. "You don't even know what that is. You just want what I had. Maybe I want what I never had? Love, respect, a sense of self-worth?" "Mike, listen to me carefully." David took a step closer. "Stop seeing her, right now, before I get really angry." "Or what?" "Or I'll make you regret the day you were born." Michael stared at his brother for a long time. He saw something new in David's eyes, not just anger or jealousy, but a real threat. "You know what, David?" he said finally. "Go to hell." He turned and walked toward the building. David shouted after him, "This isn't over, Mike. It's not over." Michael hardly slept that night. He knew the situation was out of control. David wasn't the kind of person to give up easily, especially when it came to something he considered his own. and Michael wasn't going to back down. The next day, Friday, during his lunch break, Michael went to a hardware store on Broadway. He wandered among the aisles for a long time, not knowing exactly what he was looking for. In the tool department, he stopped in front of a display case with knives. There were kitchen knives, camping knives, and work knives. "Can I help you?" asked the salesman. "I need a knife," said Michael. "What for?" Michael thought about it. What for? For protection? To threaten someone? Or for something worse? "A utility knife," he finally replied. The salesman showed him several models. Michael chose a folding knife with a 4-inch blade. Not too big, not too small, just right. "Good choice," said the salesman. "Sturdy and reliable." Michael paid cash and put the knife in his pocket. He wasn't sure why he had bought it. He just wanted to feel less vulnerable. On Saturday, Felicia asked to meet him in the same park by the lake where they had kissed for the first time. She looked tired and worried. "Michael, I've been thinking a lot about our situation," she began. "And I want to try talking to David. Explain to him that this is serious between us, that this isn't a game or an attempt to hurt him." Michael shook his head. "He won't listen. I have to try. I can't live with this tension anymore. And you shouldn't fight with your brother because of me. Felicia, you don't understand. David will never accept our relationship. Never. Then what are we going to do? Hide for the rest of our lives? Or break up?" Michael took her hands in his. "I don't want to break up. Neither do I. So let's try talking to him again, all together, civilly." Michael agreed, even though he knew deep down that it was a bad idea. A very bad idea. The meeting was set for Sunday at David's auto repair shop. Neutral territory, Felicia thought. But for Michael, the shop was a symbol of everything he had never had: success, recognition, independence. When they arrived, David was already there. He was fixing something under the hood of an old Chevrolet, but Michael suspected it was just a way to look busy. "Thanks for agreeing to meet," Felicia said. David wiped his hands on a rag and turned to face them. "Felicia asked me. I couldn't say no. David, we want to talk to you like adults," she continued, "about our relationship with Michael." "Your relationship," David repeated. "Interesting. And what do you want to tell me?" "That I love your brother, and he loves me, and we want to be together." David looked at Michael. "Is that true? Do you love her?" "Yes," Michael replied. "And you, Felicia? Do you really love him, or are you just trying to prove something to me?" "I love Michael," she said firmly, "and it has nothing to do with you." David nodded. "I see. And what next? Are you going to get married? Have children? Build a happy family?" "Maybe," Michael replied. "On what? On a warehouse worker's salary? In the apartment he rents in the most dangerous part of town?" "David," Felicia said warningly. "What? I'm just stating the facts. Michael, can you provide for this woman? Give her what she deserves?" "I'll give her what you couldn't," Michael replied. "Respect." "Respect?" David laughed. "From a man who betrayed his own brother." "Betrayed? I fell in love with a woman who left you. She didn't leave me. We were just going through a rough patch." "David, we broke up," Felicia said. "For good. And I explained why. You were upset. It could have been fixed." "No, it couldn't, because you won't change. You still think you know what's best for me." David stared at her for a long time. Then he turned to Michael. "Okay," he said quietly. "I understand. You've made your choice." Michael felt relieved. Was it really over that easily? "But know this, brother," David continued. "You've destroyed our family. And when she realizes who you really are, when she gets tired of playing charity, you'll be left alone, without her and without me." "Maybe," Michael replied, "but it will be my choice." They left the workshop holding hands. Felicia was pleased. The conversation had gone better than she expected. Michael, however, felt uneasy. David had given up too easily. That wasn't like him. His fears proved to be well-founded. On Monday, when Michael arrived at work, his boss called him into his office. "Michael, we have a problem," Mr. Johnson said. "We've received a complaint about your work." "What kind of complaint?" "They say you're careless with the merchandise, that several shipments have been damaged because of you." Michael knew that wasn't true. He was one of the most careful workers in the warehouse. "Who complained?" "I can't say. But if I get another complaint, I'll have to fire you." Leaving his boss's office, Michael took out his phone and called David. "Is that you?" he asked when his brother answered. "What are you talking about? Did you complain about me to my boss?" Pause. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about." "David, if you think you can ruin my life..." "Mike, you ruined your own life when you decided to betray your family." Michael hung up. His hand in his pocket clenched the knife handle. The war had begun. And Michael knew that David wouldn't stop until he had destroyed him completely. Tuesday, October 29th, 10:15 p.m. Hartwell Motors on Tracy Avenue had been closed for 2 hours, but the lights were still on in the office. David Hartwell was working late, finishing up paperwork for a large order. Outside, a light rain was falling, turning the October evening into a dreary picture of Cleveland's industrial district. The sound of the door opening made him look up from his papers. A man in a dark hooded jacket entered the shop. "We're closed," David said, not immediately recognizing the visitor in the dim light. The man took off his hood. It was Michael. "We need to talk," his younger brother said. David put down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "Mike, a bit late for a visit, don't you think? You know why I'm here?" "I have no idea." Michael took a few steps forward. His face was tense, his hands clenched into fists. "Enough games, David. You got what you wanted. I was almost fired today." "That's too bad," David shrugged, "but I had nothing to do with it." "Don't lie. Johnson said there were new complaints. This time, anonymous calls saying I'm stealing from work. And you think it's me?" "I know it's you." Michael raised his voice. "Just like I know you're spying on us with Felicia. Just like I know you tried to turn Mom against me." David stood up from the table. "Mike, you're paranoid. Maybe your problems at work have something to do with the fact that you're really bad at your job. I worked at that warehouse for 8 years without a single complaint. And then you started dating my ex-girlfriend and lost your focus." Michael took another step toward his brother. The distance between them was now less than a meter. "She's not yours, David. She was never your property." "So she's yours? She's a free woman who made her own choice." David laughed, short and angry. "Choice? Mike, you think she chose you? Or did she just decide to experiment with what it's like to be with a loser?" "Shut up. Don't you find it strange that a woman with a college education, a good job, and a future suddenly became interested in a warehouse worker who, at 28, is still renting a hole in the worst part of town? Shut up. She feels sorry for you, Mike. You're her project to save the poor little brother of a successful businessman." Michael hit him, hard, in the face. David staggered but stayed on his feet. "There we are, right to the heart of it." David rubbed his cheek. "Violence, the only thing you can counter words with. You deserved that punch." "What else do I deserve, Mike? What are you going to do to me?" Michael was silent, breathing heavily. There was something in his eyes that made David feel uneasy for the first time in their entire conflict. "Mike, calm down. We can talk about this." "No, we can't." Michael shook his head. "You'll never stop. You'll destroy my life until you get what you want." "What do I want?" "For me to be left with nothing, like always." David tried to get past his brother to reach the door, but Michael blocked his way. "Mike, back off. You've been first your whole life. I've been second your whole life. I've had to settle for the scraps you left me, the jobs you didn't want, the toys you grew tired of, the attention my mother gave me after she finished praising you. It's not my fault. Maybe, but now it's my turn. What are you talking about?" Michael pulled a pocket knife from his pocket. The blade flashed in the lamplight. "Mike!" David's voice changed. "Put that away." "No." "Mike, think about what you're doing. You're not a murderer." "How do you know?" David tried to back away but bumped into the workbench. "Mike, please, we're brothers. That's why you knew where to hit me the hardest." The argument turned into a fight when David tried to grab the knife. The brothers fell to the floor, rolling among tools and spare parts. David was stronger, but Michael was more desperate. At one point, Michael was on top. His hand with the knife shot up. "Mike, don't!" David shouted. But it was too late. Wednesday, October 30th, 8:45 a.m. Frank Morgan, a regular customer of Hartwell Motors, parked his car at a familiar building on Tracy Avenue. His old Honda Civic was acting up again, and David Hartwell was the only mechanic in the area he trusted. The shop door was locked, even though David was usually already working at that time. Frank knocked, waited, then walked around the building to the service entrance. The door was ajar. "David?" he called. "Are you here?" There was no answer. Frank went inside and immediately sensed that something was wrong. There was a strange, metallic smell in the air. David Hartwell's body lay between two shelves of spare parts, in a pool of blood that was already beginning to darken. His shirt was torn open, revealing multiple stab wounds. Frank called 911. Detective Jim Riley arrived at the scene at 9:20 a.m. At 45 years old, he had seen enough murders to assess the situation immediately. This was not a random robbery murder. It was personal. "What do we have?" he asked Sergeant Martinez, who was the first to respond to the call. David Hartwell, 32 years old, auto repair shop owner. Multiple stab wounds to the chest and abdomen. The body was discovered by a regular customer around 9 this morning. Riley surveyed the crime scene. Signs of a struggle were evident. An overturned chair, scattered tools, and blood stains on the floor indicated that the victim had tried to crawl away. Murder weapon? Nothing found. Judging by the wounds, a knife with a blade about 4 inches long. Any signs of forced entry? Either the killer had a key or the victim let him in. So it's someone he knew. Riley nodded. Time of death? The coroner says between 10 p.m. and midnight. Riley began by questioning Frank Morgan, who had discovered the body. The elderly man was clearly in shock and told him everything he knew. David was a good man, an honest businessman, and had no enemies. Any family? The detective asked. He has a mother and a younger brother, Michael, I think. He works at a factory. Did they get along? Frank hesitated. I don't know. Michael rarely came to the workshop, but David sometimes mentioned that they had some disagreements. Next, Riley questioned Tommy, David's assistant. When was the last time you saw Mr. Hartwell? Last night, around 7. I was leaving for home and he said he was staying to finish some paperwork. Did he seem upset, distraught? He's been out of sorts the last few weeks because of his brother. Because of his brother? Michael is dating David's ex-girlfriend. It really hurt him. Riley wrote down the information. Tell me more. David still loved Felicia. And then he found out she was with his brother. It was killing him. Did they fight? A few times. They even got into a bar fight a couple of weeks ago. The picture was starting to come together. Family conflict, jealousy, a woman between two brothers. A classic love triangle that often ended in tragedy. Riley went to marry Hartwell. The elderly woman was sobbing when he told her about her son's death. Who could have done this? She sobbed. David was such a good boy. He had no enemies. Mrs. Hartwell, I need to ask you a few questions about your sons. Did they get along? Mary wiped her eyes. There have been problems lately. What kind of problems? Michael is dating David's ex-girlfriend, Felicia. David was very upset about it. Did they fight about it? Yes. Michael felt he had a right to his own life. David thought it was a betrayal. Where was Michael last night? I don't know. I haven't spoken to him in several days. He was upset with me for asking him to consider his brother's feelings. Riley found Michael Hartwell at the factory. The worker had been called away from the line, and the detective saw a young man with a tired face and a tense expression. Michael Hartwell. Detective Riley, Cleveland Police. I have some sad news to tell you. Your brother David has been killed. The reaction was strange. Michael showed no surprise or grief. He just nodded, as if he had been expecting it. When? He asked. Last night. Can you tell me where you were between 10 p.m. and midnight yesterday? At home. Sleeping. Can anyone confirm that? I live alone. Michael, I understand you had problems with your brother. Yes. Because of a girl? Felicia wasn't his girlfriend. They broke up 6 months ago. But he was upset about your relationship with her? Michael paused. David didn't know how to lose. Did you threaten him? No. Did he threaten you? Another pause. Yes, he did. What exactly? He said he'd make sure I lost my job, and he did. I've been getting anonymous complaints about me for the last few days. Riley wrote down every word. Michael, do you have any knives at home? Kitchen knives. Any others? Michael hesitated. No. But the detective heard a lie in his hesitation. Riley's last interview was with Felicia Collins. The nurse was at work at the clinic when he managed to talk to her. I can't believe it, she said when she heard about David's death. Who could have killed him? Miss Collins, tell me about your relationship with the Hartwell brothers. Felicia told him the whole story, about her life with David, their breakup, meeting Michael, and the growing conflict between the brothers. Did David threaten Michael? Yes. He couldn't accept our relationship. He followed us, tried to turn his mother against Michael, and even managed to get him into trouble at work. And Michael? Did he threaten David? Number Michael isn't like that. He's a quiet, peaceful man. But they fought? Once, in a bar. But David provoked him. Where were you last night? At work, night shift, from 8 in the evening until 8 in the morning. Felicia's alibi was easy to verify. Michael, however, had no alibi. By evening, Riley had a clear picture. Two brothers who had been rivals all their lives. A woman who became the last straw in their conflict. The older brother, unable to accept defeat, had started a war against his younger sibling. The younger brother, backed into a corner, was ready to take extreme measures. All that remained was to find the evidence. Thursday, October 31st. Detective Riley received a search warrant for Michael Hartwell's apartment at 7 in the morning. The small, rented apartment in a neighborhood that was heavily patrolled by the police looked neat but dreary. There were no signs of a hasty cleanup. Either Michael was confident that he wouldn't be suspected, or he simply didn't think about the consequences. The murder weapon was found in a dumpster behind the building. It was a folding knife with a 4-inch blade, still stained with blood. The forensic analysis would take time, but Riley was certain that this was what they were looking for. A receipt from a hardware store on Broadway, dated October 25th, was found in the apartment. The knife had been purchased 4 days before the murder. He planned this, Riley told Sergeant Martinez. Not a crime of passion, but premeditated murder. At 10:30 a.m., Michael Hartwell was arrested at his workplace. His colleagues watched as he was led away in handcuffs, not understanding what was happening. Michael did not resist or ask any questions. He seemed almost relieved. In the interrogation room, Detective Riley laid out photos from the crime scene, the store receipt, and a photo of the bloody knife in front of the suspect. Michael, we found the murder weapon. Your fingerprints are on the handle. Your brother's blood is on the blade. We have a receipt confirming that you bought this knife 4 days ago. Michael looked at the photos silently. Michael, do you understand the situation you're in? Yes. Do you want to tell us what happened? A long pause. Michael rubbed his face with his hands. What's the point? You have all the evidence. The point is that your motives matter. Tell us your side of the story. Michael leaned back in his chair. You won't understand. No one will. Try. All my life I've been a nobody. David was the star of the family and I was his shadow. He got all the best things and I got the crumbs, and I accepted it. I accepted that that was my role. Riley listened without interrupting. But then Felicia came along. She saw me for the first time, not as David Hartwell's younger brother, but simply as Michael. She loved me for who I was, not for what I had achieved. And you killed your brother because of that? I killed my brother because he wanted to take away the only thing I had, the only thing that made me human. Tell me what happened in the workshop. Michael closed his eyes. I went there to talk to him, to try to explain that his games had gone too far. He got me almost fired. He followed us around. He turned my mother against me. And he laughed. He said Felicia just felt sorry for me, that I was her project, her way of saving a loser, that she'd get bored and go back to a real man. That made you angry? It broke me, because deep down, I knew he might be right, and I couldn't bear that. When did you get the knife? When I realized he would never stop, that he would destroy my life until he got what he wanted. What did he want? For me to be a nobody, like always. Riley wrote down every word. Michael, Your brother didn't deserve to die." "No," Michael agreed, "but I didn't deserve the life he had planned for me." "Do you regret it?" Michael was silent for a long time. "I regret that it turned out this way, but I don't regret defending my right to happiness." After Michael's confession, he was officially charged with first-degree murder. The court-appointed lawyer tried to negotiate a deal with the prosecution, citing the complex family dynamics and the victim's provocative behavior. But the prosecutor was adamant. The purchase of a knife 4 days before the murder was evidence of premeditation. Felicia Collins learned of the arrest from Detective Riley. She sat in the Metro Health Clinic cafeteria holding a cup of cold coffee. "I can't believe it," she repeated. "Michael couldn't have done it. He's not capable of murder." "Miss Collins," he confessed. "But why? Because of me?" "Partly, but the roots of this conflict run much deeper." Felicia began to cry. "It's my fault. If I hadn't dated him—" "No," Riley said firmly. "You're not to blame for 2 grown men not being able to resolve their issues in a civilized manner." But Felicia wasn't listening. In her eyes, the detective saw a guilt that would haunt her for years to come. Mary Hartwell took her son's arrest as the final blow from fate. In 1 week, she had lost both her sons, one killed, the other a killer. "How could I not have seen this coming?" she asked Riley when he came to report the official results of the investigation. "How could I not have realized that Michael was suffering?" "Family dynamics are complicated, Mrs. Hartwell. Sometimes we only see what we want to see." "I always praised David more," she admitted. "He was so successful, so bright. Michael seemed quiet and content with his life. He learned to hide his pain. Now David is dead, and Michael will spend the rest of his life in prison, and it's my fault." Riley didn't try to convince her otherwise. In his experience, family tragedies rarely had a single cause, but almost always had many people to blame. Michael Hartwell's trial took place in February 2025 at the Cuyahoga County Courthouse. The prosecutor demanded life imprisonment without parole, insisting that the murder was premeditated and cold-blooded. The defense attorney presented a psychiatric evaluation showing that Michael suffered from deep depression and feelings of inadequacy caused by years of psychological pressure in his family. He asked the court to consider the murder as the result of an emotional breakdown rather than cold calculation. Felicia testified on Michael's behalf, describing him as a kind and gentle man who had been driven to despair. Her words were sincere, but they were unlikely to outweigh the physical evidence. Mary Hartwell also spoke in her son's defense, acknowledging her role in creating a toxic family environment. "I don't condone what Michael did," she told the court, "but I understand what led him to do it." Michael showed no emotion during the trial. He sat next to his lawyer, listened to the witness's testimony, and looked at the jury without much interest. He seemed unconcerned about the outcome of the trial. In his final statement, he said, "I am not asking for forgiveness from David's family because his family is my family, and they have suffered enough. I accept responsibility for my actions. The only thing I regret is that I couldn't find another way to protect my right to happiness." The jury returned a verdict of guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced Michael Hartwell to 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. The sentence satisfied no one. The prosecution considered it too lenient, the defense too harsh. But for the Hartwell family, it meant the end. A year has passed since the murder. Hartwell Motors was sold to pay off debts. Mary Hartwell moved into a small apartment and retired. She visits Michael in prison once a month, but their conversations are short and painful. Felicia Collins transferred to another clinic in Akron. She doesn't see anyone and avoids any reminders of her role in the Hartwell family tragedy. She occasionally receives letters from Michael in prison, but never reads them. The Hartwell brothers' story is a cautionary tale about how family favoritism, unhealthy competition, and unresolved resentment can lead to tragedy. But for those left to live with the aftermath, it's not just a story, it's the daily reality of loss, guilt, and broken lives. The blood ties that were supposed to bind the family together became the rope that strangled them all.